This video was brought to you by Operation Lifesaver. America's roads can be highways or dieways. The choice is yours. Stop, look, and listen at all railroad crossings. And this video was also made possible by my donors at GoFundMe and my patrons at patreon.com. Thank you for the support in making videos like this one possible. It's a federal law that all buses stop at railroad crossings. It's because since buses, no matter their type or size, are labeled as large, high-capacity vehicles. So if the bus is fully loaded with passengers and gets stuck on a crossing because of a breakdown or whatever, everyone can have a chance to get off the bus in time if a train is coming and eventually hits it. Buses are federally required to stop, flash their hazard lights, open the doors, look both ways, then safely make it across the crossing. This law was first drafted in 1972 after the Congers, New York bus and train crash, and was given a more strict enforcement after the 1995 Fox River Grove accident in Illinois. However, in some accidents, some bus drivers still just don't seem to grasp that law. On March 28, 2000, CSX train S213-25 was holding at the Ocoee siding, approximately 9.5 miles north of Liberty Church Road, when the conductor and engineer were called on duty at 2:20 a.m. They arrived at the siding at about 4 a.m. The train was led by only one engine, CSX C40-8 number 7580, one of the older standard cab -8 models built in 1989, pulling 33 auto-rack cars. The conductor released several handbrakes and inspected the cars and the locomotive to make sure they were ready to go. Once they were set, the crew received a medium clear signal from the dispatcher-controlled siding at the south end of the siding, and the train was now underway. After passing a wayside defect detector, the crew received an automatic voice radio transmission from the detector indicating the train had no defects. The detector recorded the time was 6:25 a.m. and the train's speed was 35 miles an hour. The train later accelerated to 56 miles an hour while traveling on a descending grade. Therefore, as it ascended a 3,173-foot grade, its speed decreased gradually to about 51 miles an hour. Meanwhile, Murray County School District School Bus number 9808 was picking up students to take them to the North Georgia Elementary School. The bus in question was a 1999 International Bluebird 72 passenger bus equipped with the features you'd expect in newer buses at the time, like strong frames, air conditioning, and even an AM/FM cassette radio. We'll get back to that radio in a little bit. The bus made its first pickup at 6:35 a.m. The school bus was heading northbound on Route 411 when it turned right onto Liberty Church Road in Georgia, heading eastbound. The bus driver usually picked up passengers on Liberty Church Road, crossed the railroad tracks, and exited back onto Route 411 southbound in Tennessee, approximately 0.2 miles from the Georgia state line. As stated before, it's a law that school bus drivers must stop at crossings within a 15 to 50 foot range, turn off all radios and heating fans, quiet the passengers, slide the driver's window open, as well as open the main door, and look and listen for a train. But apparently, the 35-year-old bus driver felt that she wasn't required to follow this law, or she just didn't feel like it. She slowed down to about 15 miles an hour and rolled right onto the crossing without stopping. train was now approaching the crossing at 50 miles an hour. Crews knew this crossing well from previous hair-raising experiences, with one incident having a school bus come inches from being struck. The engineer reached for the brake handle upon seeing the bus approaching the crossing, only to slam it into emergency when seeing she wasn't slowing down or even stopping. He grabbed the horn valve, blowing it for dear life, hoping the driver would yield for the train. But nothing could be done to prevent the inevitable. CSX 7580 slammed into the bus at 6:40 a.m. The impact was so violent that the bus body ripped from the frame and bent into a shallow U-shape around the front of the locomotive, riding its nose for nearly 200 feet before the front end snagged a tree and pivoted around 180 degrees violently to the side of the tracks. Both the driver's own daughter and a boy who was sitting across the aisle from her were thrown clear. About 100 feet beyond the crossing, the little girl bounced out of the gaping maw where the front of the bus used to be, seriously injuring her, while the boy stayed with the bus until it spun and slammed to a stop to be tossed under the right front corner of the bus's body. He was conscious, but also seriously injured. At the back of the bus, a little boy who had slid into the very last seat of the bus was fatally injured when he was thrown all the way across the bus as it spun to be ejected through one of the rear side windows. This sort of damage is eerily similar to what happened at Fox River Grove in Illinois, when a Metra train slammed into a bus stopped at a red light that was sitting on the crossing. The driver's seat belt was anchored both to the seat, which stayed with the chassis, and the section of the bus body that ripped free, so it pulled taut and then snapped like a piece of thread. The chassis snagged one of the crossbuck signs and spun 180 degrees, tossing the driver clear as it did so. She hit the gravel about 20 feet from the bus, suffering from facial injuries, abrasions, and bruises. She was one of the least seriously injured of the bus's occupants. The driver pushed herself to her feet as, 170 feet away, the little girl who had just moved into the area and was the only child wearing a seatbelt climbed through the hole in the front of the bus's body, dazed, but amazingly uninjured. She'd been the only one of the kids to walk away from the accident. The train continued another 1,900 feet with brakes squealing from the crossing before finally coming to a stop. A driver that was passing by turned off of Route 411 onto Liberty Church Road at just about the same time the bus was hit, rolling up onto the scene as the train was still moving. She came to a stop, grabbed her cell phone, and called in to 911. Only one problem. She wasn't familiar with the area, and Liberty Church Road isn't marked, so she had no clue what crossing it was. She was able to give the dispatcher the general area, but not the precise location. The Murray County dispatcher got the fire, rescue, and police department rolling towards the area and asked the caller to see if she could pin down the location. When the first rescuers finally arrived, they immediately called for advanced life support units and a few helicopters to help the more seriously injured. Sadly, of the 7 children on board the bus, 3 North Georgia elementary school children died. 2 of them died at the scene, 9-year-old Daniel Lee Pack and 6-year-old Kayla Cheyenne Silvers. 9-year-old Amber Dawn Pritchett was taken to the hospital and died the next day. 3 other children suffered various degrees of injuries. Brittany Gaddis, who was 8, Georgia Manis, who was 6, Kevin J. Sherrill, who was 8, and Kaylee Clore, the bus driver's own daughter, who was 5. The only miracle in this accident was this was near the beginning of the run. Had this accident happened later with as many as 30 children on the bus, the accident could have been way more tragic with more deaths.
Parents, crying and screaming, "Is my kid all right?" My baby's on that bus, what do you tell them?
Soon, the National Transportation Safety Board and local police started an investigation to figure out what had happened. You'd think the driver would admit to her mistake, right? Sadly, not the case here. The driver, named Rhonda Clore, was 34 at the time and was hired as a full-time substitute bus driver on May 11, 1999. She had become a full-time bus driver at the beginning of the 1999-2000 school year. Between September 16, 1997 and 1998, she was the school bus driver at the Olympic Truck Lease, which had a contract with the Dalton County, Georgia schools for pupil transportation. The bus driver had a valid Georgia commercial driver's license with a passenger endorsement which would have expired on May 3, 2001. A corrective lens restriction was noted on the license, but it could not be determined whether the bus driver was wearing either glasses or contact lenses at the time of the accident. Looking into her driving history, however, there was something interesting to note. Her driving record included a conviction for speeding. She went 61 in a 45-mile-per-hour zone while driving her personal vehicle on September 21, 1991, and received a ticket as a result. But that wouldn't be the only law she'd violate. In a post-accident interview with the Tennessee State District Attorney's Office on March 28, 2000, the bus driver stated that she was coming down the hill, came to a complete stop, looked left, then right multiple times, pulled open the door, and then closed it. She said that she also looked in the rearview mirror to make sure all the children were sitting down, and then the train came out of nowhere, she stated. It was like it fell from the sky. After that, the bus driver refused any more interviews. However, one of the passengers on the bus indicated that the day of the accident was her second day riding the bus. She told the Tennessee State District Attorney's Office that she got on the bus, sat in the second row, and buckled her seatbelt. She couldn't remember whether the driver's window was open or closed, but that didn't matter, as the passenger stated that the bus went down the hill and across the tracks without stopping, just the same way the driver did the day before, without stopping. To confirm which view was correct, the VHS tapes from the onboard camera were taken from the bus and viewed by investigators. Apparently, a week or two's worth of used cassette tapes were on board the bus at the time. The camera acted like the black boxes of the bus, like those you'd see on aircraft or even locomotives. Unfortunately, some of the cassette tapes had to be repaired because they had been damaged in the crash. In the 2-week or so span covered by the tapes, they showed the driver sailing across the crossing without even trying to stop 8 times. 2 times she did stop, but only because a car was behind her and she didn't want to get called in. Also, the final nail in the coffin that explained why the driver and the pupil never heard the horn clearly, the music radio was on with the volume cranked all the way up in all of the tapes. The little child was right. The driver had clearly not been following the federal law to stop, open the doors, shut the radio off, look both ways, and then cross. The irony is she was well liked by kids and parents at the time, but oh boy, did that opinion change quickly. What's even more baffling is she had been driving a school bus for Murray County for almost a year, and had driven a school bus for the company in Dalton, Georgia school system utilized for pupil transportation for a couple of years before that. So she had been trained on all the applicable laws and policies, including on railroad crossings. When Murray County hired her, as she went through their mandated training, she A. had to be chastened for talking in class, and told the instructor that she didn't feel like she needed the class because she already knew the material. Keep in mind, the driver was not a whiny teenager in high school, but a grown woman in her 30s at a mandated training class. This should have been a red flag. In the end, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of criminally negligent homicide and 4 counts of reckless aggravated assault, and immediately requested a pre-trial diversion program that would have allowed her to avoid jail time and remove the criminal charges from her record. Thankfully, this request was denied, and that decision was appealed all the way to the Tennessee Attorney General. Despite several parents stating that she should face many years in jail, she was only sentenced to 90 days in jail. Very little comfort for the children that lived and the grieving parents of both the dead and the injured. However, in 90% of accidents, you can't just blame one person or one device for everything, as it's normally a chain of events and errors that lead to the disaster. Murray County School Board was slammed for apparently hiring their drivers, then pretty much leaving them to do their own stuff with very little supervision or oversight of their performance. After the NTSB report was published, however, they immediately increased supervision and kept a much closer eye on their drivers. The bus route the bus was traveling on was redone, and an intersection was redesigned, so the bus could turn around before reaching the crossing and come back out the way it came. As for the crossing, it was only equipped with crossbucks with no lights, bells, or gates, not even a stop sign, which was the minimum required protection for crossings mainly on private roads. Today, it has since been upgraded with bells, lights, and gates. The bus was damaged beyond repair and scrapped, while CSX 7580, which had very minimal damage, was put back into service. The locomotive was later retired in 2016, and its current whereabouts are unknown, but it's assumed the locomotive was scrapped. 20 years have passed since this tragedy. While the driver didn't intentionally kill the children, she most certainly has learned and paid for her mistakes. While nothing new was learned that day, old-fashioned lessons from painful memories of more than 50 years ago have certainly been reinforced, and it comes to show, if you don't learn from past mistakes, history will indeed repeat itself. Bent into a shallow U shape around the front of the locomotive, riding its nose for nearly 200. It's not 2 feet, it's 200 feet, you freaking idiot!